motley hues a jester skips, a harlequin with playful quips, a mask of mirth, a heart unknown, he dances in a world his own. With nimble feet and eyes that gleam, he weaves through life a fanciful dream. In jest he finds his truth, a merry heart, a soul uncouth. In truth beneath the merry guise, a chilling gaze devoid of lies, his laughter masks a darker play, a heart that knows a crueler way. Beware where shadows stretch their hand, a traitor walks a treacherous strand. In every step, in every place, he'll turn your trust, he'll leave no trace. So guard your heart, your secrets keep, for in his presence danger's steep. A betrayer's touch, a web well spun, in his dark game you'll be undone. Ah, the Harlequin, an enduring figure in the commedia dell'arte, an archetype often described as pernicious, Machiavellian, pantomime, duplicitous, playful. As a matter of fact, Harlequin's role in the commedia dell'arte is to thwart his master's plan to pursue his love interest Columbina. Yeah, kinda wild, huh? But why bring all this up? Well, it's quite simple. Arlecchino is Italian for Harlequin. She will betray someone in the story. Someone, maybe. But how can we really be sure she'll betray someone? Well, we can't, but we can look at the startling amount of red flags that says she will. Aside from her role as the Harlequin in the commedia dell'arte, the name she uses to introduce herself is the Knave. A knave is quite simply a dishonest person. Yeah, it's kind of hot. It's kind of hot. Furthermore, we have voice lines from both Childe and Scaramouche that lean into the idea that something isn't quite right here.
Look, I've got nothing against people who have their own agendas. I myself joined the Fatui to get more experience in combat. But I don't like her at all. If she stood to benefit from betraying others, she'd turn against the Tsarista in a heartbeat. There isn't a sane bone in her body.
A wolf in sheep's clothing. To exert a higher level of control over people, she puts on a graceful and cordial front. Most of those who have seen her true crazy self have gone poof.
And finally, the name Arlecchino is derived from the name Allecchino, who is a demon in Dante's Inferno that resides in the 8th circle of hell, reserved for fraud and deception. So again, a lot of red flags. It'd be like if you were sitting on an airplane, the guy sitting next to you stood up, pulled a fucking machine gun out his pants, yelled the 72 virgins await me, and just started blasting, bro. So these are these are the kind of red flags we're talking about here. But if Arlecchino really is going to betray someone, then who, and for what reason? In-game, I think it's fair to say Arlecchino is being pulled in 3 different directions. One string leads to the House of the Hearth, one to the Fatui, and another to the Tsarista. Real quick, I want to explain why I divided the Fatui and the Tsarista. While ultimately the Fatui are working for the Tsarista, the Harbingers may or may not be, fully committing themselves to the goal. They all seem to have their own personal agendas, and from what we've seen of the Harbingers, they at best tolerate one another and at worst use each other for their own personal gain. We've seen Arlecchino call Pinocchio and Pantalone cowards.
Rosaline died in a foreign land. But you heartless businessmen and dignitaries, always with a convenient excuse to remain in the comfort of your homeland. You couldn't hope to understand. So why don't you keep your mouths shut? We don't want to make the children cry.
Capitano giving out backhanded compliments.
Though her methods tarnished her honor, Loafalta's sacrifice is a great pity. Her loss shall not hinder our progress.
And Sandrone saying something that is beyond my comprehension. I've watched this trailer a lot, but for the life of me, I have absolutely no idea what she's saying here.
Utterly risible.
It sounds like utter residue, but then I don't know where the Lee is coming from. I don't know. Anyway, she doesn't sound happy while saying it, so I think it's an insult. While these interactions may be seen as nothing more than quips between comrades, actions speak louder than words. And so far, we've seen Harbingers often use one another, be it Signor with Childe and Leeway, or Arlecchino right now with Childe. Childe just getting thrown through the ringer, or even worse, Dottore using Scaramouche as an experiment only to watch it fail and leave him for dead in Sumeru. Scaramouche even had this to add regarding the dynamic of the Harbingers.
Sometimes it's you using them, other times it's them using you. Most human relationships are this way. Certainly all the stable ones are. That's how it was between me and the Fatui, and also between each of the Harbingers. So as long as you have some value to offer, nobody will ever abandon you. But after recent events, even I have to admit that I'm not worth quite what I used to be.
However, it's worth noting that these side quests don't tend to distract from the main mission of getting the Gnosis for the Tsarista. I mean, except for Scaramouche, she kind of went rogue with that one. I also feel as if Childe's statement that he owes his loyalty to the Tsarista and no one else indicates to me that there's something off between all the members of the Fatui. They don't seem to care at all for each other. Whether or not someone can serve the Tsarista without being a member of the Fatui, however, remains to be seen. So, for the purposes of this video, let's assume betraying the Fatui implies betraying another Harbinger. So, with that aside, of the three factions Arlecchino is a part of, which one is she most likely to betray? Before we can answer this, it's important to reiterate Childe Scaramouche's statement about Arlecchino. She dons a mask to earn others' approval, but in actuality is an unstable psychopath underneath. The Arlecchino presented to us so far is nice. Arlecchino is currently in control of her image, doing her best to present a likable version of herself to the outside world. I mean, sure, at times she can turn up the heat and be stern with people, but for the most part she presents herself as a reasonable and civilized individual. Yeah, I guess she attacked Furina, but for all intents and purposes, that didn't happen. And if that was the real crazy Arlecchino attacking Furina, then Furina'd be dead. So, with Arlecchino's mask currently on, who does she appear to be? For starters, she appears to genuinely care for the children in the House of the Hearth. After she took over the house, she instilled the kids with self-worth and even cared enough about Fermanet to tell him his mother was dead. She reinforces the love she has for them by thanking the traveler for helping them in their time of need.
You lent your aid to the children of the House of the Hearth. As their father, I would like to express my gratitude. Do I look like an irresponsible father to you? The House of the Hearth is very important to me. You should know that I care deeply about my children.
There's a small part of me that wants to believe she only took this moment to thank the traveler in an effort to build a friendship with him. I mean, she says as much towards the end of the conversation, but ultimately I do think she cares for the house and isn't just using them for personal gain. I mean, it's either that or Mihoyo are some demons and Arlecchino's been playing the long con. Moving on to the Tsarista, Arlecchino seems to speak highly of her in this conversation, and she says that herself, part of the reason she doubts Furina's authenticity as the Archon is due to having seen a real Archon like the Tsarista.
I am a servant of Her Majesty the Tsarista. Over my years of service, I've learned how a real Archon conducts and carries themselves.
Interestingly, she calls herself a servant of the Tsarista. Like I stated earlier in the Commedia dell'arte, Harlequin is a servant who thwarts his master's plan due to his love for Columbina. Childe also states that Arlecchino would turn on the Tsarista in a heartbeat. Barring some weird love story between the knave and Damsoletti, if you replace the word Columbina with the House of the Hearth, then the scenario becomes a lot more likely. And the final person she could betray is a fellow Harbinger, in this case Childe. Honest to God, I think she'd turn on Childe for like half a bag of potatoes. That's just like the norm for the Harbingers. I mean, of these three options, I'm going to have to agree with Childe and say if Arlecchino does end up betraying anyone, it'll be her master the Tsarista so as to protect the House of the Hearth in some way. I want to point out this may not necessarily mean she ends up like fleeing like Scaramouche did. What I think is more likely to happen is Arlecchino might do something unexpected with the Gnosis that doesn't really involve the Tsarista getting it in the end. She might use it to break the prophecy and save the kids, but in the process the Gnosis is destroyed, or maybe something along those lines. Now ultimately she might not even be betraying anyone. It seems like Mihoyo is trying really hard to paint this image she will, but in the end it might all just be a red herring. Who knows?